Live from Shore Manor Studios, this is Tales from a Small Town Journalist with Matt Shore.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out this episode of Tales from a Small Town Journalist, the podcast dedicated to all the weird and wonderful stories you're only going to hear about from reporters working in small communities just like yours. I'm Matt Shore, and I was a small town reporter for almost 10 years before I finally hung up my notepad and my camera. And in that time, I had some interesting experiences dealing with the public, and I got to know some other folks who also had some interesting experiences working with the public. Before I go any further, I do want to make sure and mention that this is a listener-supported podcast, supported by wonderful folks just like you. There are some good ways that you could show us some support. One good one would be just to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Give us a good 5-star review. Leave some nice comments wherever they take those comments, whatever platform you're using. You know, it boosts the algorithm, makes us look good, all that kind of stuff. And it strokes our egos a little bit, and that's always appreciated. Another good way to show some support would be just to spread the word, you know. Use whatever social media channels you've got: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Anyone here use Tumblr? Feel free to use Tumblr. Whatever you've got at your disposal, you know, just put the word out and let folks know about us. And finally, if you want to just give us a little bit of financial support, you can always head over to my website, mattshore.net. Go check out the shop and pick up one of the books that I've put out there. We've got comics, we've got young readers books, we've got novels, we've got horror, we've got science fiction for readers young and old. There's a little bit of everything over there, so please feel free to go check that out, see if anything looks good. This episode sees a return from George Robinson, the sports guy over at the Leaf Chronicle. George has been on here a couple times before, and it's always a good time talking to George. It's cool to catch up and reminisce and see how things are going over there at the office. Of course, George has some stories to tell even before he was over at the Leaf Chronicle. He's been doing this for a little while, just like all the rest of us, right? And he's got some fun stories to tell. I had no idea until this interview just how high up the sports hierarchy he actually climbed, the luminaries that he had a chance to speak with. It's always fun talking with sports reporters because it's so far from the things that I covered. And the people who know me are probably laughing right now, like, well, of course you know nothing about sports, Matt. That's just par for the course, right? To them, I say, get off my back, leave me alone. I know stuff about sports. I know sports talk and stuff. Anyway, I'm going to stop now before I embarrass myself further. Anyway, we'll shift gears and bring George in and get that conversation going right now. Okay, I am joined once again by now 3-time guest George Robinson, sports writer for the Leaf Chronicle. Thanks so much for joining me again, George. And I've got a very busy schedule.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Am I the first 3-time guest or no?
I don't think you're the first, but you might be the second.
That hurts.
I'm so sorry. It wasn't intentional, I assure you.
I'm devastated. I don't know if I could go on. I don't know if I could do this now.
Well, that'll be the shortest episode I've done. So how are things going over in the sports world, post-pandemic, hopefully?
Yeah, it's been going good. It's been getting better. It's been gradually getting better. I think we're still in the process of sort of transitioning back into the newsroom, which we haven't. I haven't been in the Leaf Chronicle newsroom in probably about 2 years. it's since about February of 2020 is the last time that I was in the office, in the Leaf Chronicle offices on a regular basis. Once the pandemic hit, everybody was at home and kind of working from home, and we have that capability where we can work from home through our VPN and our laptops. So it's been, really convenient for us to work from home. But I think now that things have started to get a little bit better, I don't want to say we're out of the woods, but certainly better than where we were, 8 or 9 months ago, a year and a half ago. So they're starting to bring back those reporters back into the newsroom, not only in Clarksville, but in Nashville. They're starting to bring them back in Murfreesboro, Knoxville News Sentinel. Is starting to bring more and more reporters back into the office. So now I think they kind of want us in the office a little bit more now. The only difference is where we used to have to come in the office pretty much on a daily basis, a couple of years ago before the pandemic. Now we're kind of working on this sort of hybrid model where we spend 2 or 3 days out of the week in the office and, spend some time, working from out of our office, maybe from home or wherever, to give reporters a little bit more flexibility, because I do think a lot of reporters got used to not being in the office the past couple of years, and it's a little bit more convenient, especially if you have a family like me, to be home a little bit more. So it's been we've been slowly kind of getting back to normal, which has been a huge godsend for us. I mean, I still, as a sports writer, I still wear a mask if I'm going to be in a heavily populated sporting event. But for the most part, especially with the spring, because spring sports, you tend to be outside a little bit more. I haven't been wearing my mask much lately, going to baseball games or softball games, just because it's not necessary. Those games aren't always jam-packed with people, plus you're in the open air. So it's been I feel like it's been about as normal of a life as I could expect, that was pre-pandemic, than at any other point in the past couple of years. So we're getting there.
For me, it's the opposite. With spring means more masking because I have allergies. So anytime I get outside, I have to. And my wife tells me apparently I'm allergic to everything, including myself. So
including yourself.
Yes, I have to mask up anytime I go outside to do yard work or whatever. I'd almost do well just to put on a hazmat suit. Way to protect myself.
That should give you quite a bit of an excuse or alibi as to not do yard work. You don't have to cut the grass. It breaks you out. It makes you sneeze. You feel terrible the next day. That should be your excuse for either having somebody else cut your grass or calling a lawn service to come cut your grass.
It should, but I'm just enough of like a suburban house dad now. It's like, no, I've got to mow that lawn and I've got to do it. It's no one else knows how to do it but me. It's completely irrational to feel that way.
Yeah, I know how you feel, and I just my in-laws bought my kids a trampoline, one of the full-size trampolines, not one of the mini trampolines, which is a headache.
Trampoline.
Yeah, and I certainly my kids appreciate the gift, and they've had a lot of fun with it over the past few weeks since we've had it. But it does present some issues when I have to cut my backyard, cut the grass, and also when it storms like it did last night, I have to continuously sort of tie that thing down so that it doesn't blow away, because we had a neighbor about a month ago. Our neighbor has a trampoline as well. And we had a strong storm come through, and our neighbor's trampoline blew over his fence into our backyard and smashed into our back deck. And I heard it. I heard that it smacked into our back deck, and I immediately knew what it was, but I thought it was our trampoline. So when I went outside to look, I saw 2 trampolines in our backyard, and I thought, well, that's, that must be the neighbors. So I had to go next door and knock on his door and tell him, hey, your trampoline's in our backyard. And we kind of went in my backyard together and kind of shoved it back over on his side of the yard. So over the fence. So yeah, that's, and I got to figure out a way to cut my grass, because, every time I cut my grass in the backyard, I'm gonna have to move that trampoline. So, that's going to be a process.
Yeah, me too. I'm still figuring that process out.
Yeah.
I had weighted mine down last night with sandbags, like real heavy sandbags all around it. But throughout the storm, I kept looking out the back door, like, is it working? Is it still so good?
Right. Well, we use those corkscrew land anchors, like garden anchors.
I should get some of those
we
for it.
tied down to those corkscrew anchors and just corkscrew it into the ground. Of course, you know how Tennessee soil is; it's rocky. So you hit a big rock in your down in your yard or down in the ground in your backyard, and it's hard to corkscrew that thing all the way down. So, but we did the best we could. So hopefully that'll there's like 10 of them anchored down into the ground that's connected to our trampoline. So hopefully those hold in the severe weather.
Yeah, I'll have to invest in some of those because that the sandbags worked, but that would definitely work better.
Yeah.
So let's look back on any experiences you have. I believe pandemic really kind of made all of our experiences for the past years just being at home.
Yep.
So we can dive a little bit further back to any fun experiences you have. Sports journalists, their lives are unique among journalists whose lives are already unique. So you guys are a special breed, almost like truck drivers.
Truck drivers. I've never heard that analogy.
I came up with it on the spot. How'd it go?
Truck drivers. Well, yeah, I mean, there's, I tell my son he's 15 years old, and, sometimes he'll ask me, because he watches a lot of sports, and I don't think he was ever aware of what I used to cover, years and years ago, really even before I got to the Leaf Chronicle, which I've been at the Leaf Chronicle now for about 14 years now, I guess. Almost 15 or almost 14, one of the two. Anyway, I've been there for a while. Been at the Leaf Chronicle for a long time. But prior to that, when I was working in Hopkinsville, and I think I've told this, I told you this on your podcast before, that I used to work in Hopkinsville, and we covered everything. We covered University of Kentucky. We covered Austin Peay a little bit. We covered the Titans. And I was telling my son, I don't think he realized all of the stuff that I covered and all of the athletes that I had an opportunity to cover. So, he started rattling off all of these athletes, trying to see, who I covered. And he asked me, Michael Jordan, did you cover him? I said, yeah, one game. And he freaked out. He's like, well, what was that like? And it was a game around, I guess it was when Michael Jordan was with the Wizards. So unfortunately, it's not a Bulls story, which I think everybody would love to hear, when he was at the peak of his powers, when he's with the Bulls. No, this was when he was with the Washington Wizards. So this is towards the end of his career, obviously.
But they saw him play baseball. Most people don't know about that.
Oh, yeah. The mid '90s, where he left basketball and played baseball for 2 years. That would have been, I was still in college at the time, but that would have been an even cooler story. But this particular time, I think they were playing the Grizzlies, Memphis Grizzlies, and I think maybe the Grizzlies were fairly new to Memphis at the time because they had moved from Vancouver. In British Columbia. So they had just moved to Memphis maybe a couple of years prior, and went to cover a game because, I never covered Michael Jordan before. He was close by, fairly close by, about a 3.5-hour drive from Hopkinsville. I went down there, drove, covered the game. I think they lost. The Wizards lost because I went into the locker room and they were not in a good mood. The Wizards were not in a good mood, and Michael Jordan particularly wasn't in a good mood, and had proceeded to pretty much tell the entire team how he felt about their performance. I mean, the stories of MJ are, they're pretty legendary. And the stories of how tough he could be on his teammates are pretty legendary too. If anybody's watched that 10-part documentary series on The Last Dance, I think that, coming out of that documentary, I think that was very apparent how he interacted with his teammates. But none of that had anything to do with his Washington Wizards years. I don't know if he was a little tougher on the Wizards because they weren't quite as good as the Bulls, or if maybe Michael was just, on the decline of his career or what have you. But that competitiveness was just on display. And, I can't go, I'm not going to go into specifically what he said because I couldn't say it on this, or maybe I could say it on this podcast. I don't know, but I wouldn't feel comfortable repeating some of the things
I prefer not. I try to keep things PG.
Okay, right. Yeah, some podcasts, hey, it's, whatever, you say what you want to say. But yeah, I mean, he was really explicit about how he felt about them losing that game. And he let every single one of his players know it. And there wasn't a peep in that locker room, even from the reporters that has started to kind of trickle in, which is another thing about this pandemic is, a lot of reporters haven't been allowed to go into locker rooms to talk to these players over the past year and a half, 2 years or so. I know for the NBA, for instance, the NBA 2 years ago in the playoffs, they had the bubble, down in Orlando. Nobody was allowed other than a few select reporters. Nobody was allowed around those players at that time, So I think the NBA is just now getting back to where reporters can go back in the locker room, which is a very, very key part of a sports writer's reporting, particularly if you're covering a professional team. Like an NFL team or NBA team, NHL, Major League Baseball. It's really important for the reporters to be able to get into locker rooms and talk to those players because that's where you develop relationships with the players. It's hard to develop a relationship with a player at a press conference when you have, 35 reporters sitting there waiting to ask their question. And then you got the athlete in front of a podium and a microphone. He says his little bit and walks off. Being able to go in a locker room and sit down with that athlete in a comfortable setting, really in the athlete's setting, and be able to develop a relationship with that athlete where they can trust you, because not everything they say in a locker room is on the record, you know what I'm saying, or is something that you'll be writing about, but it gives you insight into that athlete. It gives you insight into the organization, into the team chemistry, the coaching. And, that kind of information is certainly something, reporters can use to their advantage as the season goes on and their reporting gets nuanced. So, so you're going into the locker room with the Wizards that particular night and watching that display, watching Michael Jordan dress down that entire team, including the coaches, was an event. So I do know that there were several reporters that asked some questions. I don't think it lasted very long because I just don't think Michael Jordan was in a talking mood. Like I said, the man was super competitive. They had lost and he was upset and he was mad and angry and all of those things. And that's sort of when you want to catch these athletes, is in that locker room right after the game when they're the most emotional. I mean, sometimes they're the most honest in that moment. There've been a lot of times like that where I've had moments going into a locker room and you capture that raw emotion from an athlete, whether it's winning or lose, or after they won a game, after they lost a game. And you get that raw emotion. I mean, being around the Titans and being around characters like Pac-Man Jones and when he played, and Albert Haynesworth when he played. I remember Albert Haynesworth told me a story once. Well, not just me, but the reporters that were around. It was only the 3 or 4 reporters around. They were playing. Haynesworth had played at Tennessee. And they were playing, I can't remember exactly who they were playing, but he had a former UT teammate that he was going to be playing against. And they played the game that Sunday. The Titans won. After the game, I asked him about playing his former college teammate. And obviously the college teammate was the offensive lineman. Albert Haynesworth was a defensive tackle. So, They literally went head up against each other. And I asked him about playing against his former teammate, and sort of bringing back some fond memories of playing together in Knoxville and everything. And Albert Haynesworth didn't have anything really to say about the actual game. He went into this whole thing about how he told me, he said, have you ever had a puppy that was misbehaving, and you take a rolled up newspaper and you smack the puppy on the nose to address his bad behavior? Have you ever had that? And I looked at him and I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm asking you a question about playing against your former teammate. He said, no, just stick with me. He said, it's like taking a newspaper and smacking a puppy in the nose to address bad behavior. I said, well, does that mean that he was, was he holding you? He said, all game long, the man was holding me all game long. And it just went, this whole soliloquy on the newspaper, the newspaper and whacking the puppy on the nose. And I just thought that was bizarre and, sort of out of left field. And, but, professional athletes, man, there's no telling what you'll get out of them or what they'll say. And, depending on the game, the type of game that they had, you never know. You never know.
They're an unpredictable breed, like truckers, right?
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I wouldn't pretend to know. I wouldn't pretend to know the trucking industry, and I've never been a trucker before. I've only seen television shows and movies where they don't show them in the best of light. The only movie where I think truckers came out looking good was maybe what was it with Burt Reynolds, Smokey and the Bear?
I would say Smokey and the Bandit. They came out looking pretty good.
Smokey and the Bandit, yeah. Smokey and the Bear was the television show. Smokey and the Bandit, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Smokey and the Bandit. That's probably the only movie I think where truckers came out.
Over the Top. Sly
Over the
Stallone,
Top. Okay, yeah.
Truckers are also pretty awesome arm wrestlers. Yeah.
Was there like a whole subculture of arm wrestlers
according to that movie it was. And there's this one noble guy who got divorced from his wife for whatever reason, trying to rekindle his relationship with his son.
Right.
And he's butting heads with Terry Funk all the while.
Yeah. There's a television show, or it used to be a television show that may got canceled on ABC called Big Sky. I don't know if anybody's ever watched that, but that doesn't put a good light on truckers. In fact, the main antagonist in the movie is a trucker, and he goes around serial killing people in Montana. So
okay,
that was now I don't, that's not to suggest that truckers are serial killers, but certainly they didn't mind having that to be the antagonist is a job of choice. So
to any truckers who might be listening to this, just be assured that we hold you in the highest regard. And if you happen to possibly be a serial killer, we really hold you in high regard. Just know that.
And please don't let what I say detract you from bringing my packages when I
right.
no shipping issues, please. No shipping issues.
Yeah, I think we learned how valuable you guys are in this pandemic.
Yes. Oh
absolutely.
My God, yes.
See how much mileage I can get out of that analogy with trucks. So were there any other fun times with professional athletes? Because oftentimes I talk with people about covering local sports and community sports. So were there any other standout moments in your memory of professional athletes that you covered?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that kind of come to mind. One of the things that I've always thought, what I always thought was funny, was just a funny occurrence. And sometimes if you are a sports writer, or if you are a journalist, period, and particularly in Nashville, and I'm sure there's a lot of journalists in Nashville that come across this just because of the nature of country music and, the CMT awards and things like that. Some some reporters kind of rub elbows with some, pretty famous, either musicians or, actors or what have you. But there was a sort of I ran into Ashley Judd, who, obviously is a very well-known actress and talented, but she went to the University of Kentucky when she was
She's
in
a
college.
huge UK fan, isn't she?
Huge
Yeah.
UK fan, big time UK fan. Actually, she she's from Kentucky. I mean, she was born in Kentucky. Her family's from there. The Judd family's from there. But there was one year where I was covering a UK game. I was covering a Kentucky game. Drove to Lexington with our photographer and was covering the game. And I believe Kentucky it was on national television, because I don't think Ashley Judd showed up to any games that weren't on national television, because the camera always found her. I'm sure she was at plenty of games that weren't nationally televised, but any nationally televised game that she was at, the camera was going to find her. Particularly, during that time period of the late 90s going into the 2000s, she was at a lot of the big Kentucky games. And this particular game, I believe it was Florida. I may be wrong, but I believe at the time they were playing Florida, which was being coached by Billy Donovan, who's now the Chicago Bulls head coach. He won a couple of championships at Florida in 06 and 07. Back-to-back titles with Florida. But this was a little bit before they had gotten to national championship level, but they were still really good. And, Billy had really built a great program there. So they had become a big-time rival, for Kentucky back then. And this was the year, I think Kentucky had guys like Tayshaun Prince and Chuck Hayes and some of those guys. I think Rajon Rondo may have played on that team as well. But they had played Florida. They had beaten Florida. They had won. Ashley Judd was there. The game's over with. I'm doing my interviews, in the locker room, talking with some of the players, and with Hopkinsville, I didn't have to file my story immediately because it was an afternoon paper. So I could go the rest of the night and then write my story in the morning. Cause like I said, it was an afternoon paper. So we put the paper out in the morning instead of the day before. So I finished my interviews and we were leaving Rupp Arena and walking on Rupp Arena's floor. And I think the TV station in Lexington was interviewing Ashley after the game, and it was a cold night. And anybody who knows me knows that a lot of my wardrobe consists of University of Louisville, like sweatshirts and T-shirts and the knit caps on your head. And like I said, it was wintertime. It was cold. This is like maybe January sometime when, conference play is going on. And I forgot, as I was walking out of Rupp Arena or walking, across the Rupp floor after the game was over with, I had my Louisville knit hat on, and it had a big cardinal on the front of it, big, huge cardinal. Now, obviously, people know, especially if you're from Kentucky and Louisville, they do not like each other. The fan bases hate each other. There's respect there, but there's no love there. I should say that. So I'm walking across the court. The camera, the television camera that was there was facing Ashley. So Ashley was actually facing us as we're walking behind the camera. Because we didn't want to, walk behind Ashley and get in their shot. So we were walking behind the camera. And of course, I had the knit hat on. They had the big Louisville Cardinal bird on there. And Ashley stopped the interview, looked around the camera and said, hey. And me and my photographer turned around and she said, "You can't wear that hat in here." Now, I have to preface this by saying Louisville had beaten Kentucky. That particular, they always play early in the season, right? Usually around late December. Louisville had beaten Kentucky that particular year. And but Kentucky had a great team. You know, they were on a roll at the time. They beat Florida. It was nationally televised. It was a great game. Ashley was there. But she saw me with that Louisville hat on, and she said, "Hey, you can't wear that hat in this building." So I just turned around and I can't remember the score now, but I blurted out the score of the Louisville Kentucky game to her. As I walked away, I kind of said the score. I yelled out the score to her and turned and walked away, and I could hear her kind of laughing like, yeah, okay, just wait. That was the last time I saw her in person. I saw her quite a bit over the years that I covered Kentucky, you know, just because she'd be at Kentucky games, which was a lot of fun. She's really sweet and she's nice, and you know, I've enjoyed her movies over the years, but she is a UK fan, and I'm from Louisville, so I'm a Louisville fan. That's probably the only thing that we'll disagree on. But she had said that to me. She kind of stopped that interview and said that to me. And I thought, well, you know, I really like her, but I can't let her get away with that. You know, like, you know, I know I'm in Rupp Arena and I got the Louisville, you know, knit cap on, and, you know, she's sticking up for her school, but I was going to stick up for mine too. So I let her know what that Louisville, Kentucky score was that particular year. And you know, she didn't have anything to say after that. So we just kind of hurried up and walked out of there. But I remember looking at my photographer saying, "Can you believe Ashley Judd just stopped an interview to point me out and say, hey, don't wear that hat in Rupp Arena. You can't do that." So yeah, I thought that was, I thought it was strange, but also cool, you know, because I do have a lot of respect for that program, and you know, Ashley Judd's a great, you know, great actress, great person. So it was just a little funny, little interesting interaction there between me and a big time movie star.
I only hope that in the years that followed, when she had her own children, she spoke to them of the man who dared to walk across the floor of Rupp Arena.
Probably has no recollection of that whatsoever, but I would venture to say that her children have a healthy, good-natured but healthy hatred of Louisville basketball.
Probably, yes. Yeah. You know, a fun Ashley Judd trivia, she was actually in Star Trek at one point.
Was she?
A lot of people don't know this, but yes, she was in Star Trek: The Next Generation alongside Will Wheaton. She's as far as I know, the only girl that went on set and had a scene where she had to kiss Wesley Crusher, the most hated person in the entire Star Trek franchise. So that's her Star Trek claim to fame.
So Next Generation was out in the 90s, right?
80s.
Was it the 80s?
Yeah, late 80s, and I think it kind of ended in the early 90s.
Is that the one with
Patrick Stewart? Picard, yeah. Yep.
Maybe I must have been watching the reruns. I thought they were on in the 90s.
There were other spinoffs though. There was Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise. Those went all through the 90s, but it all really started with Next Generation kickstarted that, which the irony for me, I guess, like I grew up with the Next Generation, which is like the new one prior to the one in the 60s. And then they did this reboot with the films where we're back at the beginning, but it's a new generation cast, but the next generation is now the old generation. Star Trek and time travel are a lot of fun.
Yeah. It seems like they're starting a whole new group of shows now, aren't they?
Oh, they are, yes, and I'm on board for all of it. There's Discovery, which it took a little while for them to really find their footing, but I really dig that show. I loved Picard. Looking forward to the new season of that. And there's a spinoff from Discovery. So we're on spinoffs of spinoffs of spinoffs now. But anyway, yeah, there's a new brave new Strange New Worlds is what it's called. Yeah.
Okay.
Strange New Worlds. Yeah. But so that's all fun. But yeah.
Yeah. My timing must have been off on the Next Generation. It tells you how old I'm getting. It all starts to blur together. So that late 80s, all throughout the 90s. early 2000s, it's
Yeah. Well, other things do for me. Star Trek, I'm just such a geek about it. I
yeah,
know
you
it's like
know, yeah.
what sports fans know about their favorite teams, I know about sci-fi franchises.
That is 100% correct, because I can tell you probably who won national championships every year from 1980 through about 2000. But then after 2000, it starts to get very, very murky. And I can't really distinguish between, who won it in 2000. I can tell you who won it in 2013. That was the University of Louisville, even though the NCAA took their title away. We all saw it. I saw it. I watched it happen. So it happened. But other than that, the last 15 years of college basketball champions, I know, like, Baylor won it last year, and I get that, but there's probably about a 10 to 15 year period where it just is all mush to me. But very clear in the 80s. I can give you the champions in the 80s and 90s, but very murky in the 2000s.
I'm similar with the stuff that I'm into, all the science fiction.
Yeah.
I got a lot of the information straight there, but right after about 2000, 2001, it gets kind of blurry and muddy.
Yeah.
That's how it goes, I guess. We're all getting older, act accordingly. That last half is hard for me, though. I think I still have the mind of a 12-year-old sometimes.
Oh, but that's, what, I see your tweets all the time, and the posts. And
speaking of immaturity.
Yeah, well, that's right now. I look at, sometimes I crack up with some of the stuff you post, which, your Twitter, your tweets are some of the funniest I read on a consistent basis. Whether they're just like corny little puns. I know some people will think, oh, that's just, it's corny. It makes me laugh. It makes me laugh hard. Number one, because I know you. I know how you are. And I know that's right. That horror stuff is right down your alley. So, anytime you see something like that and you tweet it, it just makes me laugh. I think sometimes I retweet them, sometimes I like them, it's just funny to me.
Sometimes you respond like, what's the matter with you?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I'm still figuring it out, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Well, anyone who comes up with the concept of a dead whale, is it a dead whale coming back to life and just terrorizing?
Yes.
That's one of the most original concepts.
Well, if you want to be technical, he never died. That's my premise there. Yeah, so he's hundreds of years old.
Is it like a zombie whale? Sort of like he looks zombie-ish.
Sort of is a good way to put it. It's one of those things I intentionally left this. And for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, we're talking about my horror comic, Moby Dick, Back from the Deep. And the premise there is I left it kind of murky as to what he is. Like they say he's otherworldly, he's supernatural, but beyond that, we don't know. That way, I like leaving it up to readers to make their own interpretations.
Do you know, though? Or do you know what exactly is the situation?
See,
I haven't revealed it.
I'll never fully reveal that. Okay. I like to leave that up to people to decide. Like I have my own kind of thoughts of what I think it is, but I feel like if I say it to anybody, then all of a sudden it invalidates them. And if somebody comes up to me and it gives me some bizarre thing like, well, clearly this whale is, I don't know, just something from outer space or whatever. It's like, okay, fine. If that's what, sure, go for it.
It's like a musician who writes his lyrics, and it's like Bob Dylan. Everybody tries to interpret Bob Dylan's, music as it relates to their life. And they'll, sometimes project their life onto Bob Dylan's music and tell Bob Dylan that. And Bob Dylan's like, I don't care. Yeah, it's just a song. Yeah. And some people are like, what do you mean? You're like you're the poet laureate of our generation. It has to mean this particular thing. And Dylan's like, hey, whatever you want it to believe, whatever you want it to be, that's up to you.
And there are exceptions here. Like, I remember seeing somebody tweet one time that they were very disappointed that Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, who was once a strong advocate for conservative values, was now marching in league with the other side. And he even responded as like, "Did you listen to my music? Did you see the name of my band? Did you
Right.
miss me dressing
I
in
don't know
drag?"
I don't know how they got conservative out of Twisted Sister. Did you
Yeah,
watch the videos? Did you
yeah.
see the videos?
Yeah, like what? I'm just curious. I want to know how your brain was working in those moments. Yes.
Yeah, people see what they
Yep.
want to see, man. They
Yeah, you
see what they
clearly
want to
do.
see.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So if somebody comes out of reading Moby Dick and says, "Well, clearly that this is a positive take on the way political things work in America," I was like, "Okay, I'm going to stop you right there because I'm not
Right.
being very complimentary."
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, this has been a good chat. We've got been a fantastic talk. We can wrap things up, or if you've got any other story just burning a hole in your head, you got to get out.
Well, not any that's particularly coming to mind in terms of
It'd be tough to beat that Michael Jordan one.
yeah. Well, that was I have to say that was during a period. It was around 2000, 2001, 2002, right around that time period, where we had started to cover the Titans regularly, and I thought, this is an opportunity because Hopkinsville's a small town in Western Kentucky, and the chances of me getting out and covering significant athletic events, were just not going to be very abundant, at a small town newspaper. But the one thing we did cover quite a bit of was the University of Kentucky. Now, it required a lot of drive, and it required a lot of time and a lot of planning. But that was probably the most significant athletic event coverage that I was exposed to on a consistent basis. So during those summers of like 2000 and going into 2001 and 2002, I just decided, what? It's the summertime. There's no high school sports going on. Let me try to create coverage where where we usually don't have coverage. And so I think one weekend I went to St. Louis because there's a huge St. Louis Cardinal fan base in Hopkinsville, along with the Chicago Cubs and Atlanta Braves. Those are the three main Major League Baseball fan areas in Hopkinsville. The Cardinal, mostly Cardinals, but some Cubs and some Braves. And I just thought, well, I'll go to St. Louis and cover, a baseball game. And they were playing the San Francisco Giants. And I thought this would be a perfect opportunity for me to go cover Mark McGwire, who was playing with the Cardinals at the time, and Barry Bonds, who was playing with the Giants. And, both of them, I think, Mark McGwire had that incredible year, 98, with him and Sammy Sosa. And, they were going for Roger Maris's record, and that kind of galvanized the sporting world for that summer. And then Bonds had kind of came back a couple years later, and I think it was the year after he had broken, or it might have been a year before. This is around 2001 or so. I can't, the dates, like I said, man, you get older and the dates all kind of mushed together. I can't remember exactly the year that Bonds broke McGwire's record, single season home runs. But it was around all that time, and Bonds had Bonds was killing it that summer too. And so I went to this game thinking I can cover both in one day and get a couple of stories out of it. And, our Cardinal fan base, St. Louis Cardinal fan base in Hopkinsville would appreciate it. So I drive all the way to St. Louis. Did not think to look at any of the pregame stories leading up to the series, because it was a 3-game series. And I got to St. Louis, I had called ahead, got, credentials for the game, blah, 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 and drove all the way to St. Louis, 4.5 hour drive. Got to the game. they introduce the starters. Neither Mark McGwire or Barry Bonds played in the game. Now, granted, I didn't get credentials for the entire series. I got credentials for one game. And that one game I got credentials for, they did not play. And I thought to myself, I've completely wasted my entire time driving all the way to St. Louis to cover this, cover this game. But, like I said, it was during the summer. And I thought, we try to expand our coverage a little bit because we had been doing some Titans things, and maybe I could, so that Washington Wizards thing was another opportunity for me to, Memphis was fairly close. Michael Jordan was coming to town in Memphis, and there was going to be so I did that. I did I covered the Cardinals and Giants game, but I didn't get to write about what I wanted to write about, which was Bonds and McGwire. And because they didn't play, both of them were hurt. But again, that was an opportunity to kind of expand my palette a little bit. And I was coming off a year where we had went to the Super Bowl, where the Titans went to the Super Bowl, and we got credentials for that, and drove down to Atlanta, even though they had the worst ice storm in the history of the city. And covered the Super Bowl. Ended up in the elevator with Faith Hill and her entourage, because I think she sung the national anthem. And I was on my way up to the press box, and she was I think she was on her way down to the stadium to do the national anthem, and she had on all black leather. And it's Faith Hill, and my eyes were just like this big in my head. And now I'm not going to pretend I'm a country music fan, but everybody knew who Faith Hill was, or everybody knows who Faith Hill is. And certainly back then, when she was having hit after hit after hit after hit, she was huge. So so that was pretty significant. I remember covering that game and thinking, the food in the press box is going to be immaculate. This is the Super Bowl. Like, it's going to be like, porterhouse steak and mashed potatoes. And they literally brought out basically what I would consider gas station sandwiches. That's what they fed us at that Super Bowl when the Titans and the Rams played. It was like a ham sandwich in this like container that you would buy at like a gas station. And I was just like, really? This is, not that I went to the Super Bowl to have fine dining, but it was that was the best you could do. Gas station sandwiches. Okay, I guess, whatever. Super Bowl's expensive. I guess they were cutting corners somewhere.
It's like going to a White House banquet and eating a Big Mac.
Yeah. Yes. Big Mac, Taco Bell, all the all the good stuff. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Well, before I let you go, there's one thing I definitely have to ask. Like when you guys saw Michael Jordan, was anybody allowed to ask about Space Jam? Or is that off limits?
If you would have seen Michael Jordan rant in that locker room after that game, I would have paid somebody, some reporter. I would have paid a reporter to ask about Space Jam. Michael Jordan, it felt like to me, Michael Jordan wanted to fight. And if a reporter had brought up Space Jam in that moment, he probably would have swung. It probably would have been some.
We had a Will Smith moment there, huh?
Some fists and some feet kicking, some fists flying, because he was not happy. Space Jam was the furthest thing from my brain. The only thing I was thinking was, when is this man going to retire, and will it be this year?
Well, that's good. I think that's a perfect note to end on. It's not going to get any better than that. But I appreciate it. It's always fun chatting with you. So thanks for taking the time to do this again, man.
I always have a lot of fun, man. You know, anytime you need me, can I be the fourth time?
Sure, yeah, we'll work on that. I might need to get a few
Can,
people ahead of you at least. Can't just can't just talk to you every single time. But I'm sure there will be a fourth, and maybe
if you got some people that have been on here 3 times, make a note of it. Figure out, you know, when they're going to be on the 4th time, and then just move me up the list.
Why not, we want to do that?
I'll be the first four-time guest on your podcast.
I ought to try to do. Isn't SNL? Don't they have like the 5 Timers Club?
The 5 Timers Club, yeah.
Once I get enough people that are on there, we'll do that.
We'll wait a couple of more times. The 5th time I'm on there, I'll get a robe. I'll put a 5 there on the little lapel, and we'll, you know, 5 Timers Club. Yeah, that'll be. We won't have to get copyright acceptance from NBC, would we? You wouldn't get sued by Saturday Night Live for doing the 5 Timers Club.
We'll reword it like the 5 Timers get together or something. There we go.
There you go.
All right. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Anytime.
All right. Thanks again, George. It was great to hear from you. Thanks for taking the time to meet with me again and reminisce and talk about some of the fond memories you've got. Anybody, if you're using Twitter, feel free to go hit up Michael Jordan and tell him not to be so mean to his players in the future, which at this is a moot point by now that he's retired, but do it anyway just for funsies, right? Or go head over to Ashley Judds and challenge the honor of the UK Wildcats by letting her know how much U of L is better than them. I really have no dog in this fight, but I'd like stirring up trouble. So go ahead and do that. As we wind things down, I want to make sure and mention that if perchance you would like to see me in person, you do have an upcoming chance to do so. I will be at Rick's Comic City in Clarksville, Tennessee on May the 7th for Free Comic Book Day. What a shock that I would be involved with something with comics, right? But anyway, if you want to stop by, pay me a visit, be sure to tell Rick's that you appreciate them celebrating Free Comic Book Day by letting me be a part of it. And, you know, while you're there, you can always say hello to me, but, you know, give Rick's a little bit of business. It's a good place, and they're very, very helpful to independent writers and creators like me and all of us in this area. It's just a good store anyway. A lot of cool people that work there. So feel free to check that out. And if you need to connect with me, here are the ways that you can do so. Of course, there is my website I mentioned at the beginning, mattshore.net. It's got all the information you could possibly need about me, including ways to get in touch. Speaking of which, if you want to just reach out to me the old-fashioned way via email, it's kind of funny that I'm calling that old-fashioned now, I guess, but you can reach me at mattshore@hotmail.com. You can also connect with me on social media. There is Twitter at the Matt Shore, Instagram at the Shore, and then finally there's TikTok at the one Matt Shore. That's the numeral 1 Matt Shore. So as we wrap things up, just once again, I want to say thanks for checking out this episode. Really appreciate it. You know, if you can spread the word, that'd be awesome. And in closing, keep reading and keep listening. Thanks.